The kid's mom is infertile and old. The kid must be disabled anyway.
I ran into my ex-husband by chance, 4 years after our divorce. He was walking in front of the station, arm in arm, with a young woman. I never wanted to see him again, but it couldn't be helped. There I was, unable to run away, holding my 3-year-old son's hand.
Is that kid mine? I told you not to have it.
It's none of your business anymore, is it?
Sure. I have no intention of acknowledging him. Just don't bother me.
He's just the worst kind of man. Deep down, I'm so glad I left him. But the woman next to my ex has been acting strange this whole time. Her face is pale, and her lips are trembling. She's frightened. Is that your child? She muttered. Who could have imagined the turmoil my son and I were about to be drawn into? My name is Natalie, a 46-year-old office worker. Now, it's just me and my 3-year-old son Max living together. He was born when I was 43, through a pregnancy, at an advanced stage, but he's growing up healthy and strong, which makes me incredibly happy. I often think to myself how glad I am to have had him. When the biological father found out I was pregnant, he told me to get an abortion. Those were truly tough and painful days. I was reminiscing about those hellish days. After graduating from college, I got a job at a company and worked as the CEO's secretary. I hate to toot my own horn, but I was good at being considerate, and the CEO valued me highly. During that time, I met the CEO's son, Ethan. I caught Ethan's eye.
Natalie, it was love at first sight. Please marry me.
Ethan, raised in a privileged environment, had his unreliable moments, but that only tickled my maternal instincts, and I agreed to marry him. Since I was already favored by Ethan's father, the CEO, he quickly approved of our marriage.
Marrying a reliable person like Natalie will surely settle Ethan down. I'm really glad. Natalie, please take care of him.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear you say that. Ethan wanted me to support him at home, so I quit my job and became a full-time homemaker.
I'm the eldest son, so I plan to take over my father's company in the future. Please support me.
Understood. I'll support you with all I've got. My in-laws were very kind, and we had a harmonious relationship, so I started living with them right after getting married. However, my mill was frail and needed care, which was unfortunate. My Phil was very kind to her, always speaking to her gently, and we wanted to be a couple like them. But that dream was not to be. My Phil was a very wealthy man, and we had an elderly live-in helper named Grace. Grace and I took care of my mill and the household chores. Grace was a good person, and we lived together, helping each other out like a real family.
Natalie, thank you always. I only had a son, so having you feels like having a real daughter, and it makes me happy.
Thank you. I lost my parents early, so being treated kindly by you and my in-laws makes me feel grateful to be part of this family. My parents died early in an accident, so I was raised by my grandparents. My grandparents passed away as if they were waiting for me to find a job, so I was truly grateful to have met my in-laws. My married life was smooth sailing, But my husband's business affairs were not going so well. Though my husband intended to take over the company, his father felt Ethan was not up to the task in terms of management. As a result, my Phil was quite strict in his guidance towards Ethan.
My dad never trusts me. He refuses to retire. As long as he's active, I can't become the president.
My husband complained discontentedly. A few years later, ominous clouds began to gather over my marriage. Even after 5 years of marriage, we were unable to have children. Ethan blamed me.
Why can't you have kids? All my friends had kids right after getting married. It's embarrassing that I'm the only one without kids.
That's not fair. It's wrong to just decide it's my fault.
There's no way the problem is with me. It has to be your fault.
The conversation was futile. He baselessly decided that the infertility was my fault. While my husband was like this, my in-laws never pressured us about having children. I could tell they were considerate of me. They must have wanted to see their grandchildren too. Linda, I'm sorry we haven't been able to give you a grandchild yet.
What are you talking about? It's not your fault, Natalie.
That's right. Children are a blessing, and it's okay if we don't have them.
We're just happy to have you with us, Natalie.
My in-law said this, but I wanted children too, and I wanted to give them grandchildren, so I started considering infertility treatment. However, my husband was not very enthusiastic about it, but I insisted, and he accompanied me to the hospital for an examination. The results showed that I had a condition that made my fallopian tubes prone to blockage, making it difficult for me to conceive.
See? I knew the problem was with you. I regret marrying you. It's like I drew the short straw. This is so frustrating.
My husband blamed me as if he had been proven right, but it was also found that he had a condition that made it difficult to conceive. His sperm count was low, and their motility was poor.
What? No way.
However, the doctor said it wasn't entirely impossible, so we were advised to continue treatment. I wanted to continue the treatment, but my husband was against it.
I don't want to undergo such treatment. It's not like it's impossible for us to have kids.
More than 10 years passed, and we remained childless. My husband had stopped saying he wanted children. Although my relationship with my in-laws was good, my relationship with my husband had become strained. He started coming home late at night, often after drinking, and his work was fraught with failures. He was frequently scolded by his father, the president, and was always in a bad mood.
It's your fault for not supporting me as my wife.
He would lash out at me like that. Then, at the age of 43, I miraculously became pregnant. I was so happy and relieved that the difficult infertility treatment had paid off, I couldn't help but cry. I thought he would be happy, so I told my husband, but his reaction was unexpected. Good news. Happy for you. I'm pregnant.
Bringing this up now. What am I supposed to say?
What? Aren't you happy?
Do you even realize how old you are? You're a 43-year-old woman. Don't you know there are risks with late pregnancies?
What do you mean?
It means the child could have disabilities. I want you to get an abortion.
What?
I've decided to marry a younger woman who doesn't have these risks. Let's get a divorce. I'll give you alimony.
How could he say such a thing? I felt like I had been thrown from heaven to hell. Unable to bear it, I decided to pack my things and leave the house. But first, I had to say goodbye to my in-laws. They were shocked by the sudden news. They asked me to stay and have the grandchild here, but living with my husband had become unbearable. Ignoring my in-laws' pleas, I left the house. After receiving the alimony, I signed the divorce papers, changed my phone number, and cut ties with my in-laws. I heard my husband planned to remarry the new secretary his father had hired. It's a trivial matter now, but it seems my husband has a thing for secretaries. It would probably be uncomfortable for his new partner if I were around. I gave birth to my baby on my own. It was a beautiful baby boy. Raising a child alone was challenging, but my son was irreplaceably precious to me. One day, when my son was 3 years old, I unexpectedly ran into my ex-husband in front of the station.
Isn't that Natalie?
Hearing a familiar voice, I had a bad feeling. I gripped my son Max's hand tightly. Seeing Max, my ex laughed and said,
Given the IVF and your age, the kids probably got problems, huh?
My ex was walking arm in arm with a young woman. Could she be his new wife? I never wanted to see him again, but it couldn't be helped. There I was, unable to run away, holding my 3-year-old son's hand.
Is that kid mine? I told you not to have him.
It's none of your business anymore, is it?
Sure. I have no intention of acknowledging him. Just don't bother me.
He was an awful man, and deep down, I'm so glad I left him. But the woman next to my ex had been acting strange the whole time. Her face pale, her lips trembling. She's frightened. Is that your child? She muttered. She was whispering something into my ex-husband's ear. I couldn't hear well because her voice was so low, but I faintly caught the words, "Your father's estate is."
Huh?
Ethan widened his eyes like saucers and stared intently at my son. Then he glared at me and yelled,
You're a stranger to me now. Don't you dare come near my family's home, ever.
And with that, the two of them ran off as if they were fleeing from me. What in the world was it about? I couldn't make heads or tails of it. But being told to stay away made me think there must be some secret at my in-laws' place. Curious about my ex and that woman's reactions, I found myself heading to my in-laws' home for the first time in 4 years. The helper, Grace, greeted me with tears in her eyes, saying, "It's been so long, madam. I'm so glad to see you." My Mill had passed away 2 years ago, and my Phil was bedridden due to illness. Seeing me, my Phil was overjoyed despite his frail condition. But he looked haggard and pale and sick.
You've come at last, Natalie. I've been looking for you everywhere.
David, it's been a while. I'm sorry for not visiting sooner.
And who is this boy?
This is Max. He's 3 years old now.
So, you had Ethan's child.
I nodded firmly. My Phil tenderly stroked Max's head with a look of affection. He then handed me a business card, urging me to visit a lawyer. The lawyer was a close friend of my Phil. Following my father-in-law's advice, I visited the lawyer and was shocked by the startling truth he revealed. 2 months later, I received a call from Grace, the household helper, informing me of my father-in-law's passing. She also shared some intriguing news with me. 3 days later, dressed in mourning clothes, and with my son by my side, I headed to the funeral service. The ceremony had already started, with my ex-husband delivering the eulogy. The young woman I had met previously was standing close by him.
My father may have passed away, but I will be taking over the company and protecting it firmly, along with Molly, my father's secretary. We will also build our family together, so I ask for your support.
He spoke without shedding a tear, delivering his speech with gusto. During the eulogy, Ethan noticed me and my son and shouted in surprise,
Natalie, what are you doing here? Get out. This place isn't for you.
Ethan ordered his employee to drag me out of the funeral hall. I was upset at how rudely my own son was being treated, even though I had Max with me, but I couldn't resist when several men started pulling at my arms. The mourners were shocked by the commotion, looking at us with a buzz of whispers.
Please, everyone, be quiet.
The person who stopped the commotion. It was a lawyer who had been of service to my Phil for many years.
There is a will that the late president asked to be announced at his funeral.
Stop it. There's no need to say it. I, his only son, will inherit everything.
Ethan tried to stop him, but the lawyer ignored him and began reading the will. The contents were shocking. The company was to be left to the vice president, who had worked hand in hand with the president to grow the company. As for his son Ethan, lacking in managerial talent, he was advised to work under the vice president. His estate was to be left entirely to the child born to his ex-wife, me, if there was one, appointing me as the guardian. I was not surprised, as the lawyer had informed me of everything in advance, but the mourners were in an uproar. Ethan's fiancée bit her lip, her eyes darting around in confusion. She was working as a secretary to my Phil, so it seems that she knew the contents of the will by some means. So when she first saw Max, she was shocked because she thought Max would take away the inheritance.
What about my position then?
People going to jail don't have a position to worry about.
What? What are you talking about?
I know why your dad suddenly fell ill. Ethan looked at me, his face turning pale, glaring at me as if he saw a demon. In fact, I had heard from the helper, Grace. She saw Ethan and his fiancée Molly putting flowers in my father-in-law's food. Grace found it suspicious and secretly took photos with her cell phone. I got those photos from Grace, and after researching online, discovered that the flower is highly toxic. It's a common flower, but both its stem and root are poisonous, and even drinking water from a vase with this flower can be lethal.
That's a lie. You made this up.
There's photographic evidence and a witness, so there's no escaping it. Ethan, cornered, was desperately thinking of a way out. Then he began to shout.
It's not my fault. It was Molly. She instigated everything.
He tried to shift the blame onto his fiancée Molly. Molly panicked.
You were the one who said we couldn't become the president until your father was gone and asked for my cooperation.
You said you overheard Dad and the lawyer discussing leaving the estate to Natalie's son, which is why I felt I had no choice but to do what I did to Dad. It's your fault.
How dare you blame me? You were the one who brought the poisonous flowers, not me.
Both of them ended up confessing everything. They effectively admitted their guilt in front of all the mourners. Ethan, in a complete about-face, began apologizing to me.
Natalie, I'm so sorry. Please, tell everyone this was all a lie. My life is over if the police get involved. I beg you.
It's too late for that. I've already submitted the evidence to the police. They should be arriving any minute now. Leaving behind a wailing Molly and a stunned ex-husband, I left the scene. I heard the sound of a police car approaching. I didn't want Max to witness any more of his father's disgrace. Subsequently, my husband and Molly were taken away by the police. The crime of taking his father's life is serious, and he has no remorse, so it will take him many years to get out of the fence. With the inheritance left by my Phil, I bought a house in the suburbs where I now live with my son. Having witnessed my ex-husband blinded by greed to the extent of harming his own father, I am committed to living a modest life to ensure we don't fall into similar pitfalls. I continue to work as before, pouring love into raising my son. Just seeing my son grow up healthy and happy fills me with contentment, a sentiment that defines my current state of happiness.